As we were getting ready for this week, I actually through the whole season of Advent, I've been doing a lot of thinking about this young woman, Mary, who was, for all we know, maybe not much older than 16, 17, 18 years old at the time. And I've been thinking about her and that little boy of hers way back then at that first Christmas. It's a sentimental scene. We all know it. We've heard it. It's nostalgia inducing. It's firmly lodged in our visions and in our images, which of course means it's probably not the way it happened. Life is messy. Life is busy. And in an ancient place like Bethlehem of Judea, it was dirty and dusty. It wasn't like going into St. Mary's to have your child born. What would we have seen, or what would I have seen if I could enter that place that at that moment is about to be made holy? What would I have heard? Who else would have been there? Now, this was before the shepherds heard the glory to God in the highest. The wise men may have been on their way, but they were still 12 days away. They're not going to get there till January 6th on our calendar. And when they got there, these wise men or kings or whatever they might have been, Mary and Joseph and the baby were a little cleaner and a little more rested. And the baby probably had a place of his own. It says the wise men came to a house. Now, I want to sit there on Christmas. I want to see the divine and the human working together in a way that had never happened before. I want to experience that tiny human that God became. Even with all God's power and glory in a little newborn. I want to ponder that the creator of all this was probably a crying and a sleeping and a powerless infant. I can't wrap my head around that, but I know it's there. It has to be. In that is the amazing power of the Christmas story. Absolutely everything we think of as godlike is missing from the story of Jesus, except perhaps the angels. As I sit there or stand there and watch, over in the corner, I see some midwives waiting to do their thing. They're the midwives of the village. No doctors, none of that, of course. They had to be there. It's only natural. Before this period of the last few weeks, I hadn't been thinking much about that. I never pictured the process of getting from that unborn child in Mary and then the child in the manger. There's something in between there. And we all know what it is. Mary had arrived in Bethlehem probably earlier that day, or maybe the day before. She was dusty and dirty. Of course she was. In the ancient world, expectant women were honored. They were taken care of. So the owners of the house who had the already occupied guest rooms, what's called an inn, would have immediately summoned the midwives of the community. They would have known it was needed. Those women were needed. They were experienced, they were trusted, they know what had to be done. First, they came probably to help clean Mary up, to help her relax and get her into whatever was available for the baby to be born. Those midwives had no idea who Mary was. She was a stranger in need in their midst. And for them, to care for the stranger is essential. Now, since Bethlehem was Joseph's family's hometown, it is possible that some of his family were still there, and maybe somebody remembers him as a child from years earlier, or his parents. He may have been a long forgotten son of the town, now returning. That didn't matter. Mary was the center of their attention. She was being cared for simply because she needed to be cared for. Now, this is an event, birth, that happens regularly. It happened regularly then, it happens regularly now, and there was nothing unique or different about it. Standing there, watching it, I become aware of how good it is to see a community helping others in need, whether they know them or not. I listen more closely, and now I hear the oxen and donkey over in the nearby stables. They're singing their own songs. They're doing what they do. Again, nothing supernatural about it. It was the presence of the world that God had created. That's where they were. All the animals knew was that there were probably far too many two-legged creatures in their space. Or perhaps they knew the action of giving birth is something special. I like to think that they knew in a way that we humans have forgotten about how special that moment can be until it happens to us. Now, that may simply be my imagination and the advantage, of course, knowing what's going to happen in the rest of the book. It's easy to look back and see it, even when it's only in my mind. So Joseph, where's he? Probably somewhere nearby, perhaps next door. This is women's work. The midwives are experienced, and they will live up to the many standards of care for their time. I am sure, though, that if Joseph is the kind of husband he's going to become, he's listening intently for a distant cry and attentive to the cries of pain from Mary. He knows who the baby is. Mary and Joseph had arrived earlier. It was probably daylight when they got there. It says later that the shepherds were out in their fields at night. So between the time they arrived and the shepherds heard about it, it got dark. I can assume at that point, they probably lit some lights and a lamp and a candle. Maybe some medicinal herbs and potions that they used at the time were heating up over the fire. And then Jesus is there. Jesus is born. Easy, straightforward birth, no complications. I watch as the midwives clean the baby. They're quite businesslike and efficient, and yet gentle, as they had learned to be. They took Jesus and wrapped him in strips of cloth known as swaddling clothes. These helped him stay still. They held his arms close to him, and it kept him warm, kept his body heat in, kept him calm. It's kind of like that favorite blanket that many children hold on to so dearly. The warmth and closeness of his mother, as he was probably feeding, filtered through those cloths and helped him sleep. Mary is then washed, and after snuggling the baby until he falls asleep, Joseph returns. They marvel at what has happened, and they lovingly place their newborn in a manger, a stone feeding trough, maybe in the floor, maybe over to the side. The journey is over, but a new one is beginning. For me, this helps me see that on one level, what's happening is very common. It's a very human experience, an everyday occurrence. I know also that it is in many ways far beyond my ability to understand or explain logically. It's the time when the universe, when all of creation has changed. I am quiet, humbled by the scene. I'm in silent awe of what I have witnessed. Jesus is the same as me. I probably looked a lot like that little baby when I was a newborn, as did most of us. That's where faith begins to come to life. In this common everyday occurrence, God's grace is being printed into humanity. All common everyday occurrences now, all human life will be blessed in a new way forever. This night has made all the difference through the love of God, the Creator. God, in all, that God is, was, and will forever be is right there in Jesus. God shining forth in endless life. Life in all its abundance is wrapped in swaddling clothes, lying in a manger. God in the heavens, no doubt, said, "This is very good." Merry Christmas.